turn to Matthew chapter 24, where we will pick up where we left off last week. We'll be at the end of chapter 24. I'll end up starting at verse 36. As you're getting there to Matthew chapter 24 and verse 36, a little bit of an intro to today. I will tell you that there seems to be a lot in Bible commentaries about Matthew chapters 24 and 25 that are written from a today perspective rather than from a during and after the tribulation period perspective. And I've found that even commentators who do believe that Jesus, when he spoke these words in Matthew chapters 24 and 25, that he was speaking in reference to people who would be alive during the tribulation period. At times it seems that they they even kind of comment as though the church was Jesus' primary audience. And again, I know that they are folks that they speak about believing that Jesus was addressing who the audience would be, actually who would read it when they were going through the tribulation period. But oftentimes their comments seem to go otherwise, like that Jesus was speaking to the church. Now, we can absolutely make application to us today and in the church, and I will do that again in the sermon today, but understanding the original context and the original audience has to be first, and that's always. We always have to understand the words as they were intended in the context and to the original audience. Before then, we draw application for ourselves from that. I struggled, I've told you, I've struggled with my prep for these sermons, Matthew 24 and 25. The material was not easy. And honestly, some of what I've studied in the commentaries that I use actually wasn't very helpful to me. I remain convinced that the target audience for Jesus' comments was the generation who will be alive during the tribulation, and so the descriptions, the instructions given by him, surely then must be for who will someday read them. That nobody that will. Unless the tribulation comes in somebody's lifetime today, nobody has read these words yet that will be in the tribulation, and certainly nobody has read them yet that is already in the tribulation. So some commentators, actually even including one that I've used a good bit for these studies here in Matthew, they indicate that they believe that the audience in the still future tribulation will be only self-proclaimed believers. In other words, people that at least claim to believe in Jesus during the tribulation. That's who the audience was. I think it's all the intended audience by Jesus was anybody who will be living in the tribulation, because some people that would maybe read these things during that time who do not proclaim any faith in Jesus could be led to, I need to come into faith in Jesus. And so I really didn't understand, like I said, and I've used this guy a lot in these sermons and agree with him in a lot of other things, but I do not get. This has just been one of the really confusing things for me. Why the audience would have to be only people who in the tribulation period would have, at the time they read this, proclaimed some kind of faith in Jesus. Maybe not real faith, but proclaim some kind of association with him. For one thing, in that time, nobody's going to claim faith in Jesus for, I don't think, anything other than the real reason, because all it's going to get them is persecution, bad persecution. But anyway, all these struggles, it's been a tough go, and again, I say one more time, these words do have meaning for us. I'm making the point, though, that we really have to understand. I think that the target audience will be people who are living in the tribulation period, and they read this stuff and will understand or can understand some of what's going on and what they need to do and so forth. It does have then meaning for us because it can give us understanding about end-time events and give us understanding about what has to transpire yet, what has already transpired, what Jesus had to say about some of these future things. It gives us a lot of understanding, and then it does, I believe, give us some things that we can apply to our lives today as well, and as we go through life on this earth. And so I'll try to flesh that out as we walk through this. Let's start. I'm going to read first verses 36 through 44. 36 through 44. No one knows about that day or hour, and that this is going back to what Jesus was talking about last week, earlier in chapter 24, about the time that he will return. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Jesus said at that time, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. The Son of Man, of course, being Jesus. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other one left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken, just like the people in Noah's day were taken by the flood, and the other left. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. So first of all, I want to address when it says only the Father, Jesus said only the Father knows the time of my second coming. That was true at the time Jesus spoke these words, when he was still on the earth. The whole kenosis thing where, and some of you have heard me talk about that before, where Jesus, when he came to earth, only knew and only did what the Father told him through the Holy Spirit. He did not know everything all the time. He had temporarily set that aside so that he could walk on this earth and deal with what this earth brings the same way we do. He did not always know what was going to happen. He only knew what the Father revealed to him, and the Father didn't always reveal things to him, and this was certainly one of them. Now, in heaven, where Jesus has resumed his full glory and his full knowledge as God and everything, now he knows. Now he knows when he's coming back. But when he said this, which was when he was still on the earth, he did not know. Jesus uses this phrase, the day or the hour of his second coming, a number of times in this passage. I think the significance may be that some of those who study Scripture during the tribulation will be able to figure out that, hey, if we're in the tribulation, and Daniel said it will only be 7 years long, they could get a general idea about maybe when he's gonna come back, but they're not going to be able to get the exact day or the exact hour. And that may be some of the significance of Jesus using that phrase a good bit here in these passages. During this future time, the coming judgment will not be known about, it will not be expected, and it will be not even believed in by many, probably even most people on the earth. Just as it was in Noah's day, when all the people of the earth, for the most part, didn't believe that this flood would come. And even those who were seeing Noah build this huge ark, and likely from what we infer from Scripture, Noah was even preaching to them and telling them what was going to happen, and they didn't believe it. They weren't ready for it. They weren't expecting it. They weren't thinking it was going to happen. It'll be the same way in the tribulation period. Similarly, those who will not know about, those who will not expect, those who will not believe in the judgment that will occur at the second coming of Christ, even with all the cataclysmic events that will be happening through that time period, they will be shocked when he comes. And they will be taken away as the people on the earth who didn't believe and weren't ready for the flood to come that Noah talked about. These people will be taken away in death and in condemnation, eternal condemnation. They will just absolutely be shocked when Jesus returns. Only those with saving faith in Jesus, who will thus be ready and prepared for the judgment, even though they won't know exactly when it's going to happen, only those with saving faith in Jesus will be saved from that judgment and left on the earth. And they will be left on the earth in order to do what, then? As mortal human beings. Enter the millennial kingdom of Jesus in their mortal bodies, to live in that literal kingdom with Jesus reigning over them on the earth. They will be the ones they will be the only mortal human beings who will start that millennial kingdom of Jesus on the earth, because they will be left. The ones taken here in this illustration are like the ones taken in the flood. The ones taken in the flood were taken by the flood. They were taken in death and judgment. Here the ones taken will be those taken in judgment. Many people think this speaks to the rapture, but it doesn't fit the context. In the rapture, who will be taken from the earth? The church. And we will be, those of us with true saving faith in Jesus will be taken off the earth, but not in judgment. We will be taken off the earth, given our immortal forever bodies, eternal bodies, and we will go to be with Jesus. That's not what this illustration speaks about, but there are many, especially of certain theological persuasions, that almost have to try to make this fit into describing the rapture. So I think people of that day will need to be alert, ready, and prepared for the second coming of Jesus by doing what? What will people of that day have to do to be ready for His coming? Believe. They will have to place saving faith in Him. That's the only way that they can be ready. If they don't do that, they're not going to be ready, right? And they'll be taken in judgment and condemnation. They will need to be prepared through faith and keep watch, because they won't know exactly when Jesus will come. His coming will actually be somewhat, the way this reads, somewhat unexpected even for the people that do place faith in Jesus. I don't know exactly, I can't figure out exactly why from the accounts. Maybe the warfare between the armies of the Antichrist and the other armies of the world, maybe it will be being held off for a while, or maybe it'll look like they're not going to go to war or something. Maybe that'll lull people into, even people that believe in Jesus, into not expecting that He's going to come right then. Maybe the judgments that are being poured out on the earth, maybe people will think, well, that's over. Maybe these people that believe in Jesus will start thinking, well, it must not be time for Him to come yet. I don't know. I don't know why, but even people who place saving faith in Jesus during this time, when He returns, it will be a surprise for them. Whenever He comes back, for some reason they won't, the exact moment that He comes back, they won't be expecting it, but there He will be. So, application for today. Well, we need to be ready too, right? Do not all people today alive on earth need to be ready for Jesus? What can happen to any person on earth at any minute? First of all, they can die, right? And if you die and you haven't placed saving faith in Jesus, it's too late. It's over for you. You will be condemned. And that can happen again at any second. That any person on earth could die. And so you need to be ready. You need to be prepared. And the only way you can be ready and prepared is what? To believe. The same illustration in what it's going to be in the tribulation period. So, very easy application to us today. You better be ready. You better be prepared. And the other way that it could be, if the rapture happens and you're not a believer, you're going to be left here on the earth. You'll have to go through the tribulation period, and then you better get ready before He comes back. So either way, again, for all of us today, we need to be ready and we need to be prepared. And you can only be ready and prepared by having saving faith in Jesus. We should be anticipating, looking ahead to our departure from this life. Surely we understand that this life is only temporary, and we need to be looking forward to our eternal life through saving faith in Jesus before it's too late. Verses 45 through 51. 45 through 51. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master's staying away a long time. And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and in an hour he is not aware of. And he will cut, the master that is, will cut the servant to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. God has given this earth and everything in it to the human race. We understand that from the very first book in the Bible, in Genesis. God has given us this entire earth for all of us, humankind, to manage, to enjoy, and to manage. I think that's a lot what's pictured in this little story here. Just as the master in Jesus' story here put servants in charge to care for everything that was his. How the servants in the story handled their responsibilities reflected whether their hearts were right and good with the master. How they carried out their responsibilities that the master had given them, that reflected where they really stood, where their hearts were at in terms of their master, whether good or bad. So too, how human beings care for the responsibilities God has given us on this earth reflects whether or not our hearts are right with God and good with God, or not so much. As Jesus said elsewhere, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. That's Luke 6:45. So when Jesus returns, he will find some of those who have survived the tribulation to that point, to the end of the tribulation. Some of those, there will still be some people alive on the earth. As the tribulation is coming to a close, it will be, many more will have been killed. I forget what the final number ends up from the book of Revelation. You can figure it out, but I think it's over 3/4 of the earth will die in the tribulation period. But there'll still be some alive. And when Jesus returns, he will find some of the people that are still alive who have been faithfully serving God, even in the midst of the very bad circumstances. He will find some who have been seeking to do the will of God during the tribulation period, even in the midst of all the horror, because of their faith in Jesus. And Jesus will reward them with a place in his kingdom. But when Jesus returns, he'll also find people who are living wickedly. And like the wicked, unbelieving people of Noah's day, they will be oblivious to the coming judgment. And so when Jesus comes and finds them that way, he will condemn them to eternal damnation, and they will have no second chances after he returns. What about today? What's the application for today? Well, again, people fall into the same two categories. Those of us who place saving faith in Jesus should be continually seeking to fulfill God's will for our lives, continue to do what he has put us here to do in anticipation of the day that we will receive our place in Jesus' kingdom and even inherit a share of it. Romans 8, verse 17. We should be found by Jesus to be faithfully serving him at our death, or if we're if we wouldn't come to be a believer until after the rapture, then we will fit into the category of the people that I just spoke about that will be in the tribulation period and need to come to faith in him before his second coming. But either way, for everybody today, we need to be ready, and we need to be demonstrating that by the way we live. Why is that? Because who will actually be living to serve God and to fulfill his purposes for us in this life? Who will be the people that would actually be doing that? It's not hard. It's not a trick question. will unbelievers be doing that?
No.
Will unbelievers be living to serve God and fulfill His responsibilities that He has given to His people here on this earth, and seeking to be ready for the coming of Jesus and so forth? Will unbelievers be doing that? No. Only who? Only people who really have placed saving faith in Jesus. And so we should be striving then to demonstrate, if we're truly believers, we should be living the way we're called to live, right? So that should beg a question right off the bat. Well, I don't know. Let's not make it too personal. Let's say I know somebody. I mean, it could be the heck with it. I'm going to make it personal. If it's myself, and I'm hearing this stuff, and I'm saying, okay, I kind of have to acknowledge I'm not really walking the deal that much. I mean, I'm probably not really, anticipating Jesus coming back here at any time, and I can't say I'm really living to serve Jesus every day of my life and all this kind of stuff. What do you think I should maybe question about myself then? Am I really? Do I really have true faith in Jesus? People that have true faith in Jesus, the Bible says we should do those things. Those are the people who would do those things. And so the less I'm doing them, you see what maybe at some point I got to say, like it says in 1 Corinthians, maybe I'm failing the test. And maybe I need to test myself. Do I really have true saving faith in Jesus? Because if I'm not really doing the stuff that believers are supposed to do, that God says believers will do I need to question? Do I really have true saving faith in Jesus? If death would claim me today, Jesus isn't going to find me doing the stuff that He's supposed to find true believers doing. I think that's some of the reality of the application for today. If, I'm not going to see Jesus coming, in His second coming, but I could see Him in my death, or the rapture could happen, and either of those events, I'm supposed to be found doing the things of God, serving God the way the Bible calls us to do. And if I'm not doing that, then that means I'm not showing the evidence that I'm saved. And could that mean I really am not? And I think there are a lot of people that probably need to ask themselves that question. Because those today who live in disobedience of God and without saving faith in Jesus, obviously they're not going to be doing these things. They're not going to be living to serve God. They're not going to be living to fulfill God's purpose for them being here and so forth, right? And when their death comes, they're not going to be ready, and they're going to be condemned. That's the reality still for today. Chapter 25, verses 1 through 13. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like. At that time. At what time?
Time of Sunday.
Okay, or even the whole. At that time, at least, speaking of this future period of time, the tribulation period at least, if not at that time when Jesus returns. At a bare minimum, at that future time, this 7-year period of the tribulation period, at that time, again, I think Jesus is clearly referring to this future time. At that time, when it comes, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both of us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived, and the virgins who were ready went with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. "Sir, sir," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "I tell you the truth, I don't know you." Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. In these verses, Jesus told another parable to demonstrate the need for people of the tribulation period to be ready for His return. And again, being ready means to what? To be saved, to have saving faith in Jesus. That's what it takes to be ready in the context of these chapters. That's the only way to be ready. The parable is based on common Jewish wedding practices of that day. The short story about that is that the bridesmaids would often wait for the bride, or wait with the bride for the groom to come and get her. And the way that would work is, they would often know, a general time when the bridegroom was going to come from his place and it would generally be the bride's parents' place, and they would know a general time, but they didn't know exactly when he would come. It would be a surprise. And at some point, he would come, and then at that point, he would take his bride with him, and the bridesmaids would come along, and they would go to his place, and that's where they would have the big banquet, the wedding banquet, and feast, and so on and so forth. And so this short story is about those bridesmaids there waiting for the groom to come to her parents' home to get her, not knowing exactly when it will come. And in the parable, 5 of the bridesmaids were ready, and 5 what? 5 were not. So the 5 who were ready went with the bride and the groom to the wedding banquet, and when the 5 who weren't ready, when they finally got to the banquet, the bridegroom would not what? Would not let them in. He wouldn't open the door, the gates to the compound of the place they lived in. He wouldn't allow them to come in. And in fact, he told them what? I don't even know you. Once again, the second coming of Jesus, at that time, those who have not accepted Him in saving faith will not be ready for Him. They will not be watching for Him. They will not be saved by faith in Him. They will not be able to enter the millennial kingdom that He is about to establish when He returns here to this earth. It will be too late. I trust the application today, you're starting to get the gist. It's basically the same as what we've seen so far. Everybody had better be ready by having saving faith in Jesus. And when? When should they be ready? Right now. Now, because you don't know. Again, today for us, then they won't know exactly when He's going to come back. Now, you don't know when you're going to die. If you're not ready in time, it's too late. And there are no second chances. I will tell you, some people see this parable of the 10 virgins as applying specifically to the nation of Israel. In other words, the understanding from the parable is that this was speaking to Jesus, the ones within the nation of Israel during the tribulation period who will accept Jesus. They're the ones that get into the wedding banquet, and the ones that aren't let in are the Jews who do not. Others don't think so. Others think it's just a general statement about the tribulation period. More on that in a little bit. Verses 14 through 30. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5 as well. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come, share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. But then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you." His master replied, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him. Give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside, into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." The overall theme of this parable would seem to be faithfully serving the master while he is away. And once more, Jesus draws a clear line in the sand. And I would emphasize, Jesus draws that line, right? This is a Jesus who would never judge, right? He draws a very clear line in the sand. Those with true faith will serve him. True faith, again, what we talked about just a bit ago, true faith is demonstrated by what? James said, faith without works is dead. True faith is demonstrated by works. True faith is demonstrated by serving the Lord the way we're called to serve him. It's proven by what we do. What we do shows that we really are saved. It doesn't get us saved, it shows that we really are saved. And one day those with such demonstrated true faith will then be rewarded abundantly as they live with Jesus in his eternal kingdom. Again, only those who are truly saved by faith will do the things of God. Only those with true saving faith will obey the Scriptures and live the kind of life that believers are supposed to live. And one day, that proof of their true faith in the Lord, in Jesus, that faith will be rewarded in their being allowed to enter into his kingdom. But those who are not faithful in their service to Jesus simply demonstrate that they don't have what? True saving faith. And one day, what they do have, what do unbelievers, what's the only thing unbelievers have? Life on this earth, I think specifically is what is in view here. They have life on this earth. Oftentimes they have lots of other things and stuff too, but there are unbelievers who don't have lots of other stuff. But the one thing that all unbelievers have is life on this earth, but one day that will be taken from them. And they will be condemned to eternal punishment, away from Jesus, in a place of spiritual darkness, where there will only be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The original context, as all through chapters 24 and 25, was that those who come to true faith in Jesus during the tribulation period will faithfully serve him to the end. Anybody in the tribulation period that accepts Jesus, truly accepts him in saving faith, they will stick it out to the end. That end might be what? Their death, because many of those who come to faith in Jesus in the tribulation period will die for it. They will be martyred. The Antichrist will seek them out to have them killed. They will not take the mark of the beast from Revelation. Those who truly come to faith in Jesus during the tribulation will not take the mark of the beast. They will not do what they have to do to save their earthly lives. They will stay true to Jesus to the end. Many of them will die. That will be their end. But there will be some of them who will make it to the end, and then they will be, again, granted entrance in their mortal bodies into the millennial kingdom of Jesus here on earth. But even if they do die, then they will end up coming into Jesus' millennial kingdom the same way we who are believers of the church age will, in glorified immortal bodies, not in earthly bodies. But we will be with Jesus as well in his millennial kingdom here on the earth, except we will be in our immortal, glorified bodies. But those who do not come to true faith in Jesus during the tribulation period will not serve him. Again, why would somebody who isn't believing in Jesus, why would they not do what they have to do to save their life? Why would they associate in any way with Jesus whenever those who do are almost ensuring themselves death? Why would they not take the mark of the beast during the tribulation period? If they have not placed faith in Jesus, why would they not take the mark so that they can buy food? Those who do not come to true faith in Jesus will not serve Him in the tribulation period. Those who do not come to belief in Him during that period, and whether they die in the tribulation or whether they die at the end of the tribulation when Jesus returns, well, I assume did the camera, is it still running? Okay. We had a I didn't hear that. I don't think I want to hear that.
I said that was your 10-minute warning.
Yeah, that was a 10-minute warning. Well, we'll see how that works out. Where was I?
Whether they die.
Yeah, those who do not come to saving faith in Jesus during the tribulation, they won't serve Him, and whether they die during the trib or if they die at the end of the tribulation, which, how will they die at the end of the tribulation? Unbelievers. Jesus will kill them. That doesn't sound very Jesus-like, does it? That's what I'm telling you. That's what the Bible teaches. And we'll see that here. It's going to be part of the separation of the sheep and the goats. Either way, if they die during the tribulation or if they're put to death at the end of it, their fate will be the lake of fire for all of eternity. Application of today: those who faithfully serve Jesus until they die, demonstrate that they had true saving faith in Him. And whether their earthly life ends in death or whether it ends at the rapture, they will be rewarded and live with Jesus in His eternal kingdom. And today, those who do not faithfully serve Jesus until they die, or until the second coming, if they end up, having to go through the tribulation period sometime, these unbelievers, by not serving Jesus, by not doing the things that followers of Jesus are supposed to do, they demonstrate that they really never had saving faith in Him, and therefore they will lose their earthly life, which is really the only thing that they ended up having to hang on to. And they will spend eternity eventually in the lake of fire, hell. True believers are expected to serve Jesus like true believers. Again, this is still the application to today. The original audience was people that are going to be in the tribulation period, but we can still take something from this, again, because we can suddenly be taken out unexpectedly at any second as well, by death. And those who do not have faith before that happens, they, like the faithless servant in the illustration Jesus told, will eventually be thrown into the lake of fire. Verses 31 through 46 then. Here's the sheep and the goat judgment. When the Son of Man comes in His glory and all the angels with Him, He will sit on His throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before Him, and He will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on His right and the goats on His left. And then the king will say to those on His right, the sheep, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since when? Since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." And then the righteous will answer Him, "Well, Lord, when did we see you hungry or feed you or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." And then he will say to those on his left, the goats, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." And then they will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" And he will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." And then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Generally, the people who believe that the parable of the 10 virgins is specifically about the judgment of Israel after the tribulation period, those people that believe that generally believe that the sheep and the goat judgment applies to Gentiles only. Again, others don't believe it's so. I will say Ezekiel chapter 34 speaks about the judgment of Israel and also uses illustrations about judgment between sheep and goats. And that appears to be a reference to the end of the tribulation, or right prior to the millennial kingdom. And so I don't know. That similar language sort of would make me think that this, again, doesn't just apply to Gentiles, that the sheep and the goats is just, it's a division of those who are believers that have survived the tribulation and those who are not. And Jesus' judgment from there. But regardless, we know that both Jews and Gentiles will be judged at the end of the tribulation when Jesus returns. And so the basic truths all remain the same, whichever way that turns out to be, and that's all I'm going to say about it. The judge over the separation of the sheep and goats will be who? Who will be the judge?
Jesus.
Jesus. Who will be the judge?
Jesus.
Jesus, the Son of Man. We've seen before in John 5:22 that the Father gave judgment authority to who? The Son. This passage of verses about the sheep and goat judgment is one of many passages in the New Testament that clearly say that Jesus judges and condemns, which again is contrary to what so many in the church today will say and obviously believe. When Jesus returns to the earth, he will decide who among the survivors of the tribulation period will enter his millennial earthly kingdom. And then, de facto, all those who enter his millennial earthly kingdom, because they will all be saved by faith in him, they will all also then enter his eternal kingdom that comes after the millennial kingdom. Those who will not enter, of course, go away to eternal punishment. At the moment that Jesus appears on the earth, the opportunity for unbelievers who survived the tribulation period, the ones who failed to accept him, the time that they could accept him will be over. When Jesus appears, it will be too late. Nobody that's an unbeliever when Jesus returns they will not have an opportunity to accept him. All that they will be able to expect to see is the judgment of Jesus. Verse 31 also says that angels will come with Jesus, right? Remember when we read that there. There's something very similar in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 7 through 10 that I want to read quickly because, again, I think there's a lot of people in churches today that need to read this verse. I'm quoting out of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 7 through 10. "The Lord Jesus will be revealed from heaven in blazing fire with his powerful angels, and he will punish those who do not know God and do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus. They will be punished with everlasting destruction and shut out from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might on the day he comes to be glorified in his holy people and to be marveled at among all those who have believed." Very clear New Testament language that Jesus will destroy those who are surviving from the tribulation period when he returns and send them off to their eternal judgment. Now, this judgment of Jesus right after the tribulation, this sheep and the goat judgment, will not be the great white throne judgment spoken of in Revelation. This judgment will separate living, mortal human beings on the earth, the sheep and the goats. The sheep, the saved believers, the goats, the unbelievers. The believers will enter the promised kingdom of Messiah on the earth in their physical, still mortal human beings. In the kingdom, in this kingdom, the prophecy of Isaiah that we often read at Christmas time will be fulfilled. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. The references here to either helping or not helping those in the tribulation period who were hungry, thirsty, needing clothing, sick, in prison, whatever. They're not references to getting into the kingdom because of doing good things. Do we have to repeat this all again? I pray that we don't. Verse 34 says that the sheep, the saved, are blessed by God the Father and receive the inheritance that was prepared for them when? Before the foundation of the world, before the creation of the world. It's yet another reference to the election or the choice of the saved by God before they ever existed. As John MacArthur says, the good deeds commended in these verses here in Matthew chapter 25 are the fruit, not the root of salvation. Good deeds are the fruit, not the root of salvation. Good deeds are evidence of salvation. The ones who will be helped. Who will be the ones helped in the tribulation period? Again, two different views, depending on whether you think the sheep and goats judgment is only for Gentiles. If you're one of those who think the sheep and goat judgment is only for Gentiles, then those people generally believe that the ones who will be helped in the tribulation that Jesus was referring to as his brothers refers to Jews. If you don't believe that the sheep and goat judgment is restricted to just Gentiles, that it's any person, Jew or Gentile, that gets saved in the tribulation period, then generally the idea is that the ones that they help will simply be their fellow believers. And I'll let it at that. As Jesus said, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you what? It's in the Gospel of John, 13:35. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. If you... I didn't hear what was back here. If you love one another. If you love one another. That Jesus said, people will know you really are followers of me if you love one another. And who's the one another? Fellow believers. And again, that will never be demonstrated more vividly than in the tribulation period, because it will be dangerous even to help someone who has not taken the mark of the beast. Someone who pledges faith in Jesus in the tribulation period. And that's what Jesus is saying here, that he at the sheep and goat judgment, these ones who actually helped other believers, helped those who couldn't get food because they didn't take the mark of the beast, because they had saving faith in Jesus. Jesus is saying, only you who did that would truly have faith in me. Welcome to my kingdom. But you goats, you didn't help these believers who were struggling so badly without food and water and so forth. You didn't help any of them. That just proved you don't belong to me. And of course, again, Jesus was saying, you didn't help me, but he said, these ones who are my brothers and my sisters, if you help them, you help me. If you don't help them, you don't help me. And so that's what's going on in all those verses there. Jesus saying that in the tribulation period, people with true saving faith in him, they will risk their own lives to help other believers, because it will be awful for followers of Jesus. People who come to faith in Jesus during the tribulation period, it will be awful for them during that time. Application to today. I would hazard a guess that most of you, what I just explained to you about how this will be during the tribulation period, I would hazard a guess that most of you, if you ever heard these verses used, it was used in reference to why you should help somebody today. And while that is the application, that's not the original audience. I just explained to you the vast difference that these verses will mean to the believers in the tribulation period. To people who, if they help this person who needs that help, because that person is also a believer, and that person can't even get food or water and is under a death threat, basically under an execution notice from the Antichrist, The people that help them in those days truly will be risking their very life to do it because they're under the same threat in that period. That's a lot different than today. But again, usually what I hear these verses used as today are exhortations for you to help the poor, or to help this person who's struggling or whatever, or visit the people in prison or whatever. That's all true. That's all good stuff. We should do that, and especially with fellow believers in this life. But do you understand the difference of the context? That who Jesus was talking about as the primary audience, it will be a whole lot harder for them to do it than it will be for you or I to do it, right? But what does that say? What should that say to us? If it'll be so much harder for them to do it, what do you think about us? If it's so much easier for us to do it, what?
We should do it.
Daggone it, we ought to do it, right? That's the application. Out of all this stuff, I've been sharing all these applications. I share first the application to the intended audience in the tribulation period, but then I said, but we can still apply that in our lives. But do you see how this one, really, you see the difference? There is no comparison to us helping fellow believers today for what it will be like in the tribulation period when people help fellow believers. Because they will all be subject to the death penalty. None of them will have taken the mark of the beast. They will all be living in a hell we can't even imagine. I would hope that we've seen in all the applications that I cited today, the applications are actually pretty similar to what it will be like in the tribulation period. There's a lot of similarity. But again, the context, the context in the tribulation will be a whole lot different than our context today. And that's one of the reasons this is so important, I think, to understand who Jesus' primary intended audience for these words was and is still. The similarity in the applications that I gave you, I think, is one of the reasons that many people within the church think that Jesus was talking to, that we were the intended direct audience. I think many people believe that he's just talking to, all this stuff was addressed to us in the church. But I don't understand how, in the context of chapters 24 and 25 of Matthew, I just don't understand how you can believe that. I really don't. But many do, and many people that have saving faith in Jesus do, and so that's just one of those reasons, again, why we have different churches. Because there are many things that tie into that then, those different understandings that prohibit us from, I couldn't sit in their churches and they can't sit in our church because the teaching is going to be very different on these kinds of matters. As long as we agree on Jesus is the only way to heaven, then we just have to say, we're good to go. You're my brother, you're my sister. We just have to worship in two different places, though, because we've got a lot of different understandings from the Bible. Jesus was clearly speaking to a generation of still future people at the time he said these words. It's still future people now. And they will experience Jesus' words in a much different situation than what has existed in the church for almost 2,000 years now. Their situation in the tribulation period will be different than any. You cannot compare it, even to the years of terrible persecution by some of the Roman emperors and so forth. That still doesn't compare in any way to the tribulation period. Crying out loud, study the book of Revelation. What Jesus said himself, stuff so horrible that has never been seen before and will never be seen again. This future time. None of us has experienced the things that will happen on the earth just prior to the second coming of Jesus and at the second coming of Jesus. But someday there will be believers on the earth who will see Jesus return, who will experience those cataclysmic events of those days. Many of those people in those days when the tribulation period is on the earth who read the words of Jesus here in Matthew chapters 24 and 25, in those days they will have their eyes opened to a stunning revelation. The people in that day, when they are in the midst of this horror, and they happen to read what's in the Bible here, what Jesus had to say, they will receive a stunning revelation. They will say, I am in the midst of this, of what Jesus spoke of. They will be living the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. They will be doing so as believers in the Messiah who is about to come. And many of them will die. Probably, again, even the majority of them. But some will survive till the end. And all who come to true faith in Jesus during that time, they will enter His kingdom. And indeed, as verse 15 in chapter 24 says that we read last week, let the reader understand. Jesus said when He was saying these things, and then there's that note in there, let the reader understand. When those people in that day read this stuff, there are going to be some of them who say, wow, whoa, uh-oh. They're going to have a revelation that will stun them. And as Jesus said to them in verse 25 here in chapter 25, see, I've told you ahead of time. Once again, there aren't too many hymns that I could find to really apply to this kind of scripture. I chose a very short one, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. If you have saving faith in Jesus, you're ready. You're ready for Him to take your hand when your time comes to leave this earth. If you don't, and the time of your death arrives, you can cry out, Precious Lord, take my hand all you want. He will not. He will say, away from me, I never knew you. Do you have that saving faith it takes to be ready for Jesus? If you do, you can sing this closing song right from the bottom of your heart. And if you don't, please think about it. Let's stand and sing 680.